to make sure that we are vigilant in making sure that we don't lose the ground that had been erosion ground, but the progress that we had been made from our previous council members in taking care of that Atherton channel. So that was my comment. Any other comments on item number 12 from the council?
No.
If not, I'll bring it to the public. Does any public have a comment on the grading and drainage plan? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for a motion to approve this item.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded. Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. So item number 13, Bill, you wanted to pull that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
I guess I was a little surprised by reading this. As you know, I was associated with putting this together at the time that we had recruited Mr. Otterick's to the city manager's position. We made it clear that what the salary was. Mr. Otterick had indicated that because his fiancee had a young daughter who had just started school or was getting ready to start school, and because he had a house that it was going to take, both of them had houses, that it was going to take some time for them to move. He asked for a little bit of flexibility and some consideration for to cover a commute for a period of time. There was some discussion on what a period of time would be, and that period of time was deemed to be that by June that time would be expired, that the school would have been let out, and then by then that should give enough time for he and his fiancee to relocate down here, and the school would be over, etc., and they could make a transition into, say, Encinal School or some other school in the area at the time. And I thought that we were awful generous in coming up with a number to cover his, transportation and any inconvenience for a period of time. But we were pretty adamant that we wanted, a city manager to be living in the house. That had been the tradition that had been here for quite some time. The house out in the park is called the city manager's house. We took a tour of the house at the time and also drove around the area and pointed out Encinal School, which is where a third grader or fourth grader would be going. So I'm a little taken aback by I guess by the request or the request for consideration, and don't feel that the sheriff or the taxpayers ought to be bearing the cost of an extra $30,000 in the new fiscal year. Even if we find other people to live in the house, I'm not sure that we would recoup the full $30,000. My reason I'd like to have a discussion on that is because it was a surprise, and I'm not really sure who the council member who was requesting it, and then I guess finally. Normally the council approves a commission or a team to go handle things like that, and I really don't think that we should just be appointing people to go negotiate things. I mean, it may be the mayor and the vice mayor, but normally the council approves those things and has a discussion on them. So I wanted to have a discussion on item 13, and also point out that I've got a couple comments verbally, as well as one email that I will be happy to read. I think it was addressed to you, Elizabeth, and all council members with regards to this item as well, that we can read into the record at the time.
Are there any other comments from council members?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
And I guess the question is to the city attorney. Is this a personnel issue? And is this something that we should be discussing in open? right now, at this point?
I use your microphone. Sure. The answer is, it is a peripheral personnel question. And as I see it, it's an administrative question on how to move forward. That part of it is absolutely appropriate to be done in public. The public has a right to comment on, especially the process and procedure and how they want to see it go. And the actual negotiations per se can take place in a closed session, especially if it's an ad hoc committee appointed to talk about this with the city manager. That's the way I see it at the present time. And it may come back to the city council with a recommendation at some point in time, and that may or may not be appropriately done in closed session, but probably not.
Thank you.
All right?
Could I make a comment?
Yes.
Best of my recollection, we did not make the search for a city manager contingent upon finding somebody that would live in the house. As I recall, we had an ad hoc committee that did the most of the work on this, and as I recall, the council had a discussion about a salary figure, and if I recall right, we assumed that if the city manager were to live in the house, that the amount of salary would be reduced by the value of the house. And so there was some negotiation that took place with the ad hoc committee and the city manager on this that I was not part of, that ended up with kind of a compromise figure on interim period. Now, as I understand it, the city manager, there are complexities beyond his control that make it, I will say, impossible at this point in time anyway, to move himself and his significant other and family to this area. So I'm not quite sure, what the problem is here, what people are concerned about. I think that, as I say, I wasn't part of the negotiations that took place. I did ask a question at the time when we were talking about the contract. I asked for more detail, and I was given a little bit at the council meeting, but maybe not the entire picture. So, this is playing out in this fashion. I think that it was a bit of a surprise, I believe, to the city manager as well, as to what has happened here. But as I say, I think it's beyond his control at this point in time.
So I have a couple of questions about this item, and I think either the city clerk or maybe city manager or someone could answer. Does the town have a set policy or ordinance that stipulates that the city manager reside in the Watkins house?
That would not be legal, unconstitutional.
Okay, so, however, we do have, or it seems like we have had the tradition, quote unquote, of having a city manager reside in the Watkins house over the past years. But I have to agree with Vice Mayor Carlson that it was my understanding that it was the employment of the city manager was not predicated on him having to live in the Watkins house. It is offered up as a potential benefit for him if he wants to, because the quote-unquote rental value of the house is not a taxable salary event, because there would be other duties associated with living in the house, such as being sort of like the caretaker of the park. And so instead of being taxed on that additional $60,000 value, which it's calculated as being $5,000 a month, then it's kind of a more of a financial benefit for the city manager to do that. And again, so I think there has been a little confusion because I did get a call from a resident who said, well, you know, you're going against town policy. And I said, I don't believe we have a formal policy about the house having to be rented by the, lived in by the city manager. And maybe we need to create some kind of a policy, maybe we need to create some kind of guidelines about what to do with the house, because it is a town asset, and if it's not being used by the city manager, you know, what other uses are there for it that would generate financial benefit to the town. So I feel uncomfortable discussing our city manager's very personal situation in public. I mean, we're all public officials, we're public servants, but there is, I think, a line that we shouldn't cross in talking about our his personal situation or personal life. I think that we went through, well, the ad hoc committee went through 100 resumes to find this candidate and this employee. And I think he's been here for about 2 months. And to create a situation that makes him feel welcome because of his personal situation, I think is the wrong approach and the wrong way for us to treat a valuable employee, staff member. So I think that if the house situation is an issue and cause confusion, we need to clarify it as a council by setting out some guidelines and policies. But we also have to understand personal circumstances that are really beyond one's control, and give our newly hired city manager the benefit of the doubt and let him do his job going forward and prove himself with us. So that's all I have to say about that. If there's no other comments from council on this, I'll open it up to the public to hear.
Well, I'll make another comment if I'm allowed. If you want me to wait till after public comments, I'll be happy.
Which would you prefer?
It's up to you, whichever you like. I didn't know if you were asking if anybody had a comment or other people who haven't spoken. I was unclear.
Okay, well, I thought you had spoken, so why don't we open it up for public comment, and then we'll bring it back to council for final comments. Yes, sir.
I agree with you that someone's personal business should not be brought out of a public meeting, but the compensation of public employees is definitely the public's business, Mr. Wiest. And I think the problem, there are two problems I see here. One problem is that in past years, the value of this home was not taxable because it was considered a wash. That is, the manager got to live there, but he also had to work there, so the net compensation was zero. If he chooses not to live there now, it's unclear why there should be a change from that net compensation of zero because of the no work being done into additional income. I think it's a mistake, even if you have Superman working for you, to make a major adjustment to compensation 2 months after someone's been hired, particularly when there are major issues in the town about employees taking major cuts and those cuts being delayed and a lot of controversy over reconsidering it. I would offer the suggestion, though, that taking the money he's requesting and turning it into a performance-based bonus, which is specifically tied to the completion of certain objectives, is something that probably everyone would find more palatable and understandable under the circumstances.
Are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Step up.
Are you referring to me?
Whoever would like to, there were 2 hands up, so whoever would like to step up, please do.
Well, I don't expect that anything I have to say is really going to be taken seriously by what is referred to throughout the town as this APOA-appointed council. I will make my remarks because I was part of the ad hoc committee that spent months and had several interviews with, at that time, candidate George Rodericks. And to put it bluntly, this staff report is a gross misstatement of negotiations and what transpired during negotiations. It is a fairy tale. There is no way on earth we ever said that we were looking at more than a short-term alternative as far as thinking that the commute would be something that we would want to see. He states in this report that he was advised that he would consider the home and decide upon its use by June 13th. That was not something discussed during negotiations. It was pretty clear he was going to be moving into the home. And the next point, this decision point was written into the city manager's contract, is not true at all. What is written into the city manager's contract is a provision for living in the house and the conditions under which he would live in the house. As far as deducting it from an overall compensable salary of $220,000, we never discussed an overall compensable salary of $220,000. We did discuss the potential value of the house and the fact that it's tax-free, so far as he would live in that and be responsible, in essence, for the security of the house. But we never, ever discussed a compensable salary of $220,000. Nor was the reference to housing offset in the $2,500 monthly payment ever considered a housing allowance, as is referred to here. It was referred to every single time as a travel allowance and something that was going to offset some additional expenses, but never, ever a housing allowance. As far as who this member of council is, who not only with regard to this report, but with regard to putting the employee resolution on the December agenda is, I think if we're talking about transparency, and I notice on your website you've spoken about transparency, it seems the council is going anywhere but in the direction of transparency. There's no reason why we shouldn't be told who these council members are who's speaking with our city manager behind the scenes. And never in my life have I heard that a city manager directing who is going to be responsible on the council for revising a contract or any other document for the council as is in this memo before. That kind of control just has never existed. But I guess it's like asking council members to wear a tie to council members.
Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak? Come, step forward.
Malcolm Dudley, 51 Talbot. The house, when it was given to the town, we made the decision on the council to allow the Cliff Freegang, who was then the supervisor for the park, to live there, and he did initially. And he retired at the same time that Jack Farrell retired, and we needed to hire a new city manager. We hired Ross Hubbard, who was living down in Irving at the time. It was expensive to try to live up here. So he thought it made sense to, rather than have the person from the park living there, it'd be better and more convenient for the new city manager and probably better for the town. So that's why we made that decision. It was not a policy. And each time we hired a new city manager, that was always an option we allowed them. But we knew that some cases they would prefer not to live there. Ross Hubbard, as it turns out, he thought it was a great opportunity. He was here 8 years. And but it was a time when real estate values are going up so rapidly, he felt like he was left out, that he missed the opportunity. And so while it had been an advantage to him initially, he then looked at it more as a disadvantage. And so he went to Moraga to become a city manager. Part of the deal was they provided funds for him as a loan to buy a home. But there's never been a solid policy that we had to be for any one individual. It was there for the benefit of the town. In fact, when Jerry Gruber was the city manager, he decided that it might be well to consider that as our art center. And we've taken away the art center from that operation. And we were considering doing it, using it for that purpose. So it's never been committed just for one person. Thank you.
Are there any other members of the public who'd like to speak on this topic? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to council for closing remarks.
Well, first off, I do have the letter that I said I would read into the record. So that's Robert Ferrero.
Is this sort of a public comment? So this would be in the public comment section?
Sure.
Because it's a member of the public who's asked you to read something?
Yeah, and I announced at the beginning I had a letter to read,
Okay,
right?
but I didn't know it was a member of the public.
Yes, it's Robert Ferrero, and as I mentioned, he sent you and all council members a letter and says, as a resident of Atherton, I strongly oppose changing the terms of the city manager's housing agreement. He should have negotiated at the time of hiring the additional cost to commute from Marin. If he feels the value of the home at Holbrook has no value, then that is what should be added to his pay, $0. Frankly, his waffling about living in the home suggests that perhaps he is not firmly committed to Atherton. I would ask that he reaffirm his commitment to the position at the current offering or begin a search for a replacement who will then commit to serving the town. Robert Ferrero, and he doesn't have his address in here, but I read that on his behalf. So and I think we all got copies of it. So my closing comments are the following. First off, again, I'll reiterate that, there was clear discussion on what the pay was. When there was the extra interim assistance for the commute, I do remember, and Jerry, you point out that you did bring it up and you questioned, why would we put that in? I know that during discussions, there was concern by several council members on the selection of the current city manager, that was he going to move here, because that was a big issue. We wanted somebody to move down here. So, a quick change about, it doesn't seem right to me. We're only a couple months into the contract, and we're 5 months away from the date when we were told that the move would have to occur. So again, we're still putting money into that house. In fact, in the current check registers, there was over $4,000 for gutter replacements on the house that we just spent in the last month or two. And before that, when Mr. Gruber was here, we spent several $100,000 on upgrading that house. So it is an asset for the house, for the town. The town spends a lot of money in it. And if somebody doesn't want to live there, that's their choice, but I'm not sure that there needs to be the taxpayer have to bear the burden of additional costs associated with paying for a house that no one's living in, and then paying additional salary plus the benefits that go on top of that, if in fact they would be added to the salary. And so I am not in favor of this proposal, as you probably have guessed, and I'll end my comments. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other council members who'd like to make a comment?
Yes, I would. I think there are, I always hate these kinds of things. After the fact, guessing as to what the facts are on the thing. When was Councilman Dobby expected back to the town?
He'll be back at the end of next week, I think.
Okay. Because Jim was a member of the ad hoc committee, and I think I would like to have an opportunity to hear from Jim as to a little more about the
Excuse me, Jim was
wasn't.
not an ad hoc committee member.
He was not?
No, it was,
Kathy and myself.
right.
Oh, okay, I stand corrected on that. Bill, I apologize, I thought it was Jim that was on that.
And perhaps I could elucidate on the council member that spoke with me about this particular item. It was Councilmember Dobby who brought that up to me.
Okay. Well, it sounds like we're not gonna get to the heart of this tonight on the thing. That we probably need to sit down as a council. I'm not quite sure how to proceed on this, but we need to have a discussion, I think, with you, city manager, and probably as part of a negotiation in closed session where the Bill, you're the only member of the ad hoc committee that was still on the council, where we can kind of go back and refresh our memories as to what happened as a group in the discussion and what you've all talked about, and see if we can't clear up the air as to what the expectations were that were set at that point in time, because it's not we don't want to be unfair to anybody on the thing, but at the same time, I also will say that as far as the house is concerned, though, there are alternatives. It could be another staff member that moves in the house, and we could make an offer to, like we did the city manager, to have some value associated with that might
Trade salary.
be negotiated as far as the amount of salary that would be received. I suppose we could rent the house out. So there are alternatives, but we want to separate maybe the two things here. The interim city managers, or not interim, the city manager's compensation, and do the right thing there in terms of making sure that the expectations that were set, we're following through on a fair basis, and then address the house thing separately.
So are you suggesting that we continue it?
No, so, do you have any comments on this?
Yeah, briefly. Obviously, I wasn't here during that period of time, and I understand that circumstances may have changed and this issue has come to light. There is value in the recruiting process. The cost of the town to try to recruit the town manager, I'm sure, is considerable. And I personally think that George should have an opportunity to perform, and I think that the discussions that you and Jerry have to try to come to some common ground, or just, I mean, I know that there's figures here, $60,000 compensation rate of $30,000. I don't know what the final outcome would be at this point, and I think that's a discussion that we should start having, because I don't believe that starting this process over again would be healthy for the town, because I believe that George hasn't had an opportunity to do his job, and try an open recruitment again to replace George, or saying, hey, geez, I'm sorry, this isn't gonna work for you, it personally doesn't work for me. So I think that, you know, circumstances do change, and this opportunity should be discussed, so, thank you.
Do you want a follow-up, city attorney?
Madam Mayor, looking at what's on your agenda tonight and hearing all the parties, I think what would be appropriate under the Brown Act would be if the mayor wants to appoint an ad hoc committee, whoever it is, 2 people, not a quorum, to meet with the city manager and discuss the issue, then come back to the city council in a closed session and talk about whether or not the city council is willing to negotiate, and if so, what number or numbers or things would the council be willing to do. That can be done in a closed session. However, setting any salary has to be done in an open session.
Okay, so I've listened to the public, I've listened to all of our council members, and I've heard the advice of our city attorney. And I think that this is a very sensitive issue. My personal feelings are that we worked very hard, everyone worked very hard to find a city manager. Went through 100 resumes in an entire year. And I think that we have no official policy requiring a city manager to live in the house. If that city manager's personal situation is such that it's preventing him to move there, no matter what the initial intention had been, I think we need to evaluate that. I will take it upon myself as mayor to appoint an ad hoc committee pursuant to city attorney's recommendation and advice at this time, and we will negotiate with we'll discuss this with the city manager and bring it back to the full council in closed session in February.
And you want to announce who that ad hoc committee will be, or?
I'd like to make the ad hoc committee be Vice Mayor Carlson and myself. So we will table this until we bring it back to council in February. Moving on, we'll go on to our next agenda item, which is public hearings, which we have no public hearings at this time. And our regular agenda, item 14, is regarding,
If I could ask a question, because of my recollection, when we've nominated ad hoc committees before, I think the council ratified those, that the mayor would do
No.
that or not?
The opposite.
No, not ratified who was on it, that we asked for one to be appointed.
Under the policy, it has been done that way before.
Well, it had been done when I was the mayor, that's how we did it, but
It
that's
has,
okay.
it has been done, but your policy say that the mayor can appoint an ad hoc committee at any time. It's a matter of whether or not, the mayor chooses to do so.
Okay, well, fine. We followed the different procedure last year, but I apologize for the outburst.
apology accepted. So item number 14 is the appointment to fill the vacancy on the Transportation Committee. City Clerk, would you like to give the report?
Yes, this item was continued from the December meeting because there was only 4 council members present. Seeing that there's only 4 council members present tonight, you can choose to vote or another term discussion of potentially putting it off till February when you have 5 council members again.
Do I have any questions from council, clarifications?
Yes.
Vice Mayor?
When is the next recruitment date for committees and commissions?
So the next expiration date is June 30th, so I would start recruiting around early April.
June 30th.
June 30th, we changed it.
It used to be in the spring, but we've changed it.
Okay, well, we have on our agenda discussion a little bit later on here about the Transportation Committee. I'm wondering if we shouldn't just postpone appointing anyone to this committee until we decide what the Transportation Committee is going to be doing.
Okay. Any other council member comments on this?
Well, there's not a Transportation Committee meeting until March, so the urgency is, in fact, when I read the minutes from the last meeting, it was continue it until the next meeting when all 5 council members will be there, and I did ask the city manager if it was next meeting or all 5 council members, since Mr. Dobby is out of town, so.
I don't think we were aware that Mr. Dobby was going to be out of town at that time. I don't think he mentioned that he was going to be out of town at that time, so, yeah. So I think the consensus is that we will continue this item until such time as we have a full 5-member council, or alternatively, until the recruitment process to fill all committee vacancies and appointments in June 30th. Does that sound reasonable? Okay.
Yes.
Do we need a motion for that?
Notes.
Okay, can I get a motion
So moved.
and a second? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Going on to item 15, our commission, committee discussion and direction. City manager report, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. When the council considered disbanding the Town Center Task Force Committee and the Library Building Steering Committee, as was mentioned at the last council meeting, the resolution that established those required modifications. As the opportunity to revise the resolution arises, staff has a number of other suggestions for the council's consideration. Those are itemized in the staff report here as items 1 through 10. Number 1 being annual reports, 2 being the website issue, 3 being appointments, 4 Arts Committee, 5 Audit Finance Committee, 6 Environmental Programs, 7 Library Building Steering Committee, 8 Town Center Task Force, 9 the Transportation Committee modifications, and 10 the actual city council representatives to the committees. Staff will return if the council ultimately decides to disband library task force and town center task force committees. Will return the resolution for modification, assuming that's the council's direction later this evening. Staff requests that the council consider each of the above modifications and provide staff with some direction as to whether to include them in the resolution as modifications, modify them in some way, or not include them. That concludes the staff report.
So I'd like to ask council if we have, any council member has a technical or clarifying question for staff, and I would like for us to wait until after public comments to express opinions or further discussion. So at this time, does any council member have any clarifying or technical questions for staff on this report?
Two questions actually. One was, other than the fact that there is another item on the town center and the library committee, what specifically precipitated this look at all of the committees with the drastic recommendations that actually have come? And what communications has there been to some of these committees that the recommendations, or has there been any discussion with the committee chair or committee members for these committees, especially the ones that we're recommending either to spin off or disband? Which would have seemed appropriate.
I haven't talked to any of the other committees. It was just an objective look at this, first coming in as the new town manager, looking at the committee roster. It was coming before the council, potentially coming before the council for modification. So in looking at it, I thought there might be some suggestions for change. And so I bring them up to the council as an item of interest.
Are there any other council questions this time? I'd like to open it up for the public comment, please.
Smith McKeith in Maple Leaf Way. I'd like a question for you, Madam Mayor, or the town attorney on the process you're following. In prior city council meetings, I've listened to discussions from council members about items, and then the floor was open to discussion or comments from the public. It seems to me that you're changing that order, so we're asking the public to comment first before we hear what you have to say. I would be interested in the council's views on this and other matters before we comment.